I served 24 years in the U.S. Congress, and then I was a U.S. ambassador to the World Food Program, FAO in Rome. You would think that as the United States Congressman and then as an ambassador, that it would be hard to be humble. But the fact is, when you're a U.S. ambassador, especially a U.S. congressman, you get humbled every day. And I'll never forget my first election for Congress, and it was a very tight race, and it was a good candidate. In those days, we debated the issues. It didn't get personal. We had something like 26 debates. And it was really it was a classy campaign, if I can say so myself. But anyway, it looked like I was going to win. And in the last 2 weeks, I had my campaign staff together, and there was about 20 of us. And one of my friends came running in and said, "Tony, Time Magazine is on the phone. They want to speak to you." And you know, in those days, I was not elected to Congress, and if a reporter from a national magazine knew your name, that was really unusual, because nobody really of national prominence really knew your name, especially if you weren't elected to Congress. And so I'm thinking, wow, Time Magazine, this is really big time. And I said, well, get the name. I'll call him back in 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, you know, this is my chance to really make a splash in the United States. And, you know, Time Magazine, they're really going to be looking for something really important. And so I said to my friends and my supporters, I want to say 3 things. What do you think? And they said, you know, that sounds pretty good. So I said, well, let's get that person from Time Magazine back on the phone. And I'm thinking, I am really ready to speak to America. Okay, this is what this person from Time Magazine said. "Hi, Tony. This is Kathy from Time Magazine. Would you be renewing your subscription?"
I've heard that story many times before.
I get humbled every day. When President Bush appointed me ambassador, he said to me 2 things. He says, "I want you to feed the world, and I want you to bring hope to the hungry." And I looked at him and got real quiet. I said, "Is that all?" As the director of the Alliance to End Hunger, I lead a coalition of more than 80 corporations, nonprofits, universities, faith-based organizations, and we're dedicated to building the political will and the public will to end hunger. And we do this by, we've brokered partnerships between Alliance members, like some of the ones you've heard about this morning, between Elanco Animal Health and Heifer International. And we elevate hunger on the national agenda by studying how voters think about hunger. And we share it with politicians and the media. And I believe most importantly, we cultivate and we build champions for hungry people among our elected officials. What's the problem? Well, I think you know the problems as well as I do. You've heard about them, and we'll continue to hear more about them this week. More than 2 billion people in the world today make less than $2 a day, and 1 billion people make $1 a day, and 25,000 people will die before the day is up. And they'll die of hunger. And they'll die of hunger-related diseases. 49 million people in America are living at risk of hunger today in our own country. How can that be? Hunger, both domestically and abroad, is fundamentally a condition of public and political will. It's not a question of know-how, of we don't know what to do. We know what to do, and we know what it will cost. Hunger persists because I think We lack the leadership and the collective will to end it. Everybody's got a role to play. For years, as a U.S. Congressman and then U.S. Ambassador, I attended many global summits. We had them in Rome. Been a number of people that would come there, and heads of state, and we would sign these beautiful documents, and we said it a number of times that we are going to end hunger, or at least we're going to cut hunger in half by the year 2015. We're not even close. And we would forget about these documents, and then every 5 years we would wake up and say, oh, we got to do this again. A few weeks from now, voters will head to the ballot box for a midterm election that will set the tone for politics in Washington for the next few years. And the election will have a decisive impact on the progress on hunger. I'm an optimist, but I am deeply alarmed by the partisan rancor and the supercharged rhetoric that I see taking control of Washington. I'm an optimist even though that I've seen so many things in the world that have absolutely turned my head. I've been to about 130 nations of the world. And some of you maybe have heard me tell this story. And I tell this story often because I can't get it out of my mind. In 1984, I went to Ethiopia, and it was the time of a great famine. And what happened is that they had a hideous government in power then. They came in power by killing half of the cabinet of the ruling party before then, and they shut down the government, shut down at least the country to the outside world, and they were facing a drought. The drought turned into a famine. The famine, after that, it turned into a civil war, and it was 6 months before anybody could get in there to care and find out what was going on. 1 million people had died in Ethiopia before we could get in there, and I felt, because I was chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger, that I needed to take a look to understand this. How can 1 million people die? How can that be? And so I went to Ethiopia, and I was with Mother Teresa's group, Sisters of Charity. We went up country from the capital of Addis Ababa, and we were in a small clinic, probably no bigger than maybe 2 of these stages that I'm standing on, in the middle of nowhere. And as I walked into this clinic, there were thousands of people, Ethiopians, that had been walking for many miles. They looked sick, certainly malnourished, in trouble. As I walked in, one of the doctors there, the only doctor actually, grabbed me. He said, come outside. I want you to see something. And we can only take care of 5 kids here because they're all malnourished. They're all they're dehydrated and they're dying. And so I went outside with him, and people were handing me their children. They thought I was a doctor, and half the kids they handed to me were dead, and the other half were dying, and we could only handle 5 children. There were 3,000 children there at least. And I saw that for 3 days, and I was stunned. I couldn't talk. I felt like a zombie. I walked around Ethiopia different. They took me all over the place in Ethiopia. I could hardly talk. And I remember coming back on the plane from Ethiopia that, you know, we do so much in Congress, it really don't amount to much. And I was going to make my life count, and I was going to spend my time working on this issue, whether it was domestic or international. And so that's what I've been trying to do, but I'm still optimistic because when I come to a room like this and I see the Farm Bureau, I see the financial group come together like this, and all the people, and the students here, people that are connected with the food banks and soup kitchens. I'm excited because you're doing something. You're doing the thing that Mother Teresa said to me once. I had the pleasure of meeting her when she was alive. I met her 6 or 7 times. And I asked her, I was with her once in Calcutta, and the first time I met her, we went to this very poor region in the center city, and she was trying to show me some of her programs and how it worked. And we went in this one street, and it was just packed with people lying on the sidewalk, sick, and it was just masses of people. And here I am, supposed to be chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger, and I'm saying, I said to Mother Teresa, I said, I don't even know where to start. I'm supposed to be chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger for America. I'm not even sure I can handle this block. Where does one start? And she didn't say anything to me, and she went and picked this person up, brought this person home, began to wash him off. She got some help to bring him home, brought him back to her hospice, and she began to love him. And as she did to everybody, she loves people. She touched them, she hugged them, she washed them off. And she came back to me later that afternoon, and she said to me, always remember, do the thing that's in front of you. You can't all come to Calcutta. Do the thing that's in front of you. So what you're doing here in Iowa, what you're doing here in the university, what you're doing here as part of the Farm Bureau, you're doing the thing that's in front of you. You can't all go to Calcutta. But if everybody did what you do in this room, probably 3/4 of the stuff we do in government we wouldn't need to do. Mother Teresa said, do the thing that's in front of you. I am alarmed, though, by some of the partisan stuff that's going on in Washington. A recent example of this is the child nutrition bill that has been criticizing the lack of leadership and bipartisanship in government. Politicians, they're kind of in a self-preservation mode these days. They're sacrificing, I think, what is right for the sake of political expediency. We should all remember that President Obama's pledge to end childhood hunger in the U.S. by 2015 was first announced by his campaign at this very summit in 2008. And I'm sure many of you were here that day and were excited about a presidential candidate committing on our issues. And no one knows better than you that individuals, and civic groups, and businesses, they all have a role to play in the fight against hunger. And we were excited that day because we also understood that the government must do its part too. Because it's the only thing out there with the resources to turn this problem around. And as a down payment on his campaign pledge, the president requested an extra $1 billion per year for child nutrition in his budget. It was a good start. But without his continued leadership, the budget request, it becomes an empty gesture. In last August, 15 months after the president's budget request, the Senate passed a child nutrition bill with an additional $450 million per year in our nation's school and summer nutrition programs, and this was a big increase. It fell short of what was needed, but it was an increase. The Senate did more than just come up short, though. They used a $2.2 billion cut to the SNAP program, which was the food stamp program, to pay for the bill, and they did it with the consent and the urging of the White House. So if hunger was a priority for the president and the Congress, then they should have gotten together to protect the food stamps and pass the child nutrition bill. But they didn't, and as a result, the bill got bogged down in the House, and they failed to pass it. Now we've got a continuation of the same old politics, and only a small chance of getting a bill passed once Congress returns for their